Bill Belichick is one of these coaches where everybody knows who he is. He was the former head coach of the Patriots for over 2 decades. He was a former general manager. This guy knows the sport better than anyone. A lot of people think he's the best coach of all time. And now he has a chance to translate that into the college level. And this was going to be a firsthand account of Belichick's transition from the pros to the college game. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while. Hope you didn't miss me too much. This is Bando's Breakdowns, episode 39. It is the first episode in the month of March. Thank you again for joining me. Had a bit of a week off, decided to change some things up. It's going to be kind of a new-ish routine going forward, at least when we're in the football offseason. So you will see this show every 3 weeks. Then we will take a week off, barring any breaking news exceptions, and then we will come on the following week. So thank you again for adjusting to this new schedule, but we are back. We are here, and it's time to go through a bunch of stuff. So before we get into everything, just wanted to quickly remind you all to please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the ETV network. We're very, very close to 1,000 subscribers. We're slowly but surely getting there. Again, it would mean so much to us if you like the content that I do, if you just like ETV overall, if you like certain shows on the network like this one, the MMA Outsiders, which has a little bit of a interesting turn and twist, if you will, this week. You'll have to watch the episode to find that one out as it airs later in the week. But with that being said, though, just as a quick reminder to please be sure to do that. You can also follow the show on social media at Bando's Breakdown. It's scrolling across the bottom as well. But again, keep that in mind. That's where all the clips live. You can do so on Instagram. You can do so on X. You can do so on TikTok. All the same thing. Go there, check it out. Would very, very much appreciate you guys following those accounts and also following me at my personal Instagram and X, which is where most of my stuff lives, written work or otherwise, at Bando99 as well. And of course, just as a quick reminder too, again, for those of you on the audio-only side, be sure to check out Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and so much more. So if you're literally doing anything, if you're sitting at your desk, if you're on a lunch break, if you're on a work break, whatever the hell you're doing, or whatever the heck you're doing, rather, please be sure to check out the audio-only feed. And, of course, you can go back over to the YouTube feed as well. And, of course, just a quick shout-out to check out all of our new content on etbnetwork.substack.com. Very, very small contribution there monthly. It's only $5 a month. Would very, very much appreciate if you tuned in over there to see all the new content that we're putting out, all the bonus coverage from all the shows, including my recently released first edition of Zain, Zinger Part 2, hoping to build that into something special here in the coming weeks, months, and beyond. But it is well. Just also one last thing I forgot to mention in regards to Playback. Stay tuned for more info on our involvement with Playback later on in the show, because I'm sure you guys are probably wondering, for those of you who are first-time listeners, what Playback is all about and how they correlate with what we do. So again, just as a reminder that Bando's Breakdowns is presented by Playback. So just something to keep in mind there. Let's get into the show, though. We're finally ready to roll here. Zain's overview. Have a lot to get to today. I had some things get spiced up in the last few days with some topics that I didn't think I would be leading with. All right, let's get right into it here. We got Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach from this past weekend for Davis's WBA lightweight title. Went to a draw. Very, very anticlimactic type of fight. Lamont Roach gave Gervonta Davis all he could handle in the ring for 12 rounds. Unfortunately, it was on the wrong end of a really bad call by referee Steve Willis in the 9th round. Tank Davis took a knee, which per the rules, you can't, you can do it. It's going to cost you. And sure enough, it didn't cost Davis. What should have happened was it should have been a knockdown for Roach, and he should have won the fight by decision. But instead, it was not called by Willis, kind of like a soft warning, if you will. Very, very surprising stuff there. And let me read you the latest developments with this because the Nevada State Athletic Commission is getting involved. So let's take a look here, just so I can give you the most accurate information um, possible, because there's been a lot of misconstrued info. So this, according to the New York Post, at the time that this is being recorded, it was as of 2 hours ago, and it's being alleged that there was a technical issue, or no, sorry, not alleged is the wrong word. It's being reported by the New York Post that there was a technical issue here. So it says during the round in question, following the commission's request for the replay video, there was a technical issue preventing the commission from receiving it within the allotted time for review. A New York State Athletic Commission spokesperson stated. Therefore, the referee's in-ring decision um, was relayed upon, and the fight continued, which is interesting. Um, and it says, had the knockdown been scored correctly in the ninth round, the majority draw scoring would have been flipped to a victory for Roach. So obviously a huge fight, obviously a huge just fight turning sequence, if you will. A lot of people thought Roach won the fight, even with the missed call by the referee, including myself. I'd have to go back and rewatch it again, but the CompuBox numbers, or excuse me, the final stats numbers of this fight were very interesting. In fact, I actually have it right here and readily available, which is good to know. Here we go. Here we go. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Okay, let me find it. It is right here. So we got some numbers here on this. Let's go in a little bit more and check it out. So yeah, the CompuBox final stats. This is what I was looking for. I had them up here. Here we go. So Davis landed 103 out of 279 total punches. 93 out of 210 were power punches. And of course, in the jabs category, Davis only landed 10. Roach landed 25. So a lot of interesting percentage numbers here. Of course, Davis outdid Roach in two of these categories, in total punches and in power punches, but still, for whatever reason, the fight played out the way it did, and it was arguably Davis's worst performance of his career. I would love to see a rematch between these two. There's been a lot of just smoke online between these two, just about everything that happened. I think it would be a great rematch for the sport of boxing. Everybody was buzzing about it on a weekend where there wasn't a UFC pay-per-view. There wasn't much going on. I mean, there was UFC Vegas 103, which we're not really going to get into because there's really not a ton to get into from the event. That's more so what the MMA Outsiders is for this week. But given that there was no major UFC event, given that this was the biggest fight on the books this past weekend, very, very interesting to see how many people have reacted to this in short order. In short order. So exciting stuff there as well. But I would love to see this rematch. It's got to happen. I think it's owed to Roach and it's owed to the fans to know what really happened between these two, because this was a great fight. And I think the story is far from over. And I think, just the controversy element in itself really, really made this thing a whole lot more interesting. So just something to bear in mind there as well. We're going to briefly move over to college football. We're not going to talk about college football too much today. There's too much combat stuff and there's too much college basketball stuff to worry about. But we have to talk about this because this is fresh news. We're going to have some more college football stuff on the way with Bando's Blitz and with Zinger Part 2. So stay tuned for those. You want your college football fix? I know you do. I'm going to give it to you, and I'm going to give it to you in as succinct of a way as possible. But we have so many other things on this show that we need to prioritize. So we're going to move into this, though, because this is a major topic that I could not miss off this show this week. So the news came out in the last several days that it looked as if North Carolina was going to be a part of a Hard Knocks off-season series. And now the news has come out within the last several hours that it is no longer occurring. It was reported by Yahoo Sports that Belichick and UNC and the parties that be could not come to a deal. This is very disappointing because I think that college football has gotten significantly better over the last several years. I really do. I think it's gotten a lot more fanfare. I think the pageantry in it is great. I think there's some parity involved in college football with all the upsets that you see. And of course, the big name personality coaches. Bill Belichick is one of these coaches where everybody knows who he is. He was the former head coach of the Patriots for over 2 decades. He was a former general manager. This guy knows the sport better than anyone. A lot of people think he's the best coach of all time. And now he has a chance to translate that into the college level. And this was going to be a firsthand account of Belichick's transition from the pros to the college game. And I thought this was going to be really cool. It sucks that it's not happening. It really does, because it should be happening. I think all parties deserve it. I think college football fans should be given the access to see what really goes on with the best coach of all time inside what is attempting to be a powerhouse level program to its college basketball counterpart. And that, I think, is very, very interesting as well. So just something to bear in mind too, that I really like what I really like what I really like what Belichick has been able to do so far. He recognizes that this is a huge deal. He recognizes that this could be his one chance to show that he can win at another level of the sport. And I hope they can come up with another solution, because all parties deserve it. Belichick deserves it. And even if you don't like North Carolina, still it goes to show just how lucrative that job is a chance to be. And I think a lot of people would have been very, very keen to see all that. So, for sure. Just wanted to give a quick timeout in the middle of the show to remind you guys that Bando's Breakdowns is presented by Playback. I teased it a little bit earlier that there was an announcement coming, and sure enough, without further ado, here we go. Presented by Playback, watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, rubbing your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. And with that, we can get back to the show. All right, let's get into the UFC now. We'll preview UFC 313 in just a minute, but I wanted to go through a UFC roundup of some things that we missed here in the last several weeks. So there's been some updates on the let's just say on the TV rights front here, and there was a call with TKO, an earnings call, I'm pretty sure, and the UFC, they're in direct talks with, a lot of media partners of who their next deal is going to be with next year. Is it going to be ESPN Plus in the United States? Is it going to be somewhere else? Again, first off, fascinating stuff. Okay, fascinating stuff. Number one, ESPN Plus is the sole UFC provider in the United States of America. Huge, huge thing to recognize there. That's number one. Number two, it carries tons of incredible content across all major sports. It was going to be a great vehicle for the UFC to push their sport to new heights. And I think they've done that. I think they're bigger on a global scale now than maybe when they were with Fox. I think the issue that people have with this whole kerfuffle, if you will, is the fact that I've seen more negative reviews about people's viewing experiences with the UFC and ESPN Plus than I have positive reviews. Okay, it's very, very concerning. That's number one. Okay, number two, the UFC needs to get on the right partner. Personally, I don't think Netflix is a good fit for them. I really don't. I understand Netflix is getting into live sports, but when you talk about the avalanche of UFC content that occurs on a yearly basis, they're only off 10 weeks out of the year. So you're going to expect Netflix to carry half of those when they have shows and other ventures to worry about. I don't know if Netflix is down for that. Amazon Prime, they've covered boxing for a few years. They've covered one championship for a few years. Okay. Maybe that's a better fit because they know the combat audience well. And then, of course, if they go back to ESPN, that's another positive as well, because ESPN already knows the UFC portfolio. So I really do think Netflix is the worst option. And I also think, too, the UFC really needs to look at, does the pay per view model still work? I know too many people who, live in other countries or live elsewhere that say the United States has the worst pay per view model out of all the countries. We have to pay for ESPN Plus, which is a certain fee. Then you have to pay for the pay per view, which is the same fee every month. Then you have to hope the pay per view works. And if it doesn't work, you're screwed out however much money. Then you got to do it all over again. So doing that once a month is not very sustainable, number one. And number two, what's even worse about the whole thing is the fact that is the fact that the UFC doesn't admit when there's issues. They did in the beginning. They did in the beginning of the partnership, but they just simply don't admit when there's serious issues and when things need to be accounted for. I don't know, man. I really don't understand it. They really need to look in the mirror and see, what is really going on inside their not production, but just making sure the pay per view is accessible. And the reason why I want to bring this up is now that this earnings call is such a point of contention in the MMA community because of the recent comments that Mark Shapiro made about the UFC Apex. Okay. And he talked about how there's really no different experience whether you're at the UFC Apex or whether you're at an arena. Okay. I'm going to debunk Mr. Shapiro immediately. Okay. I don't know Mr. Shapiro from Adam. So I could be being very arrogant towards him and whatever. I know he's probably busy doing his own thing. I know he's like super Hollywood focused and all that stuff. I totally understand that. But there is a huge difference. The Apex is a warehouse style venue that holds a couple thousand people versus an arena that could hold 20 to 25 to 30,000. Okay. Not only that, the UFC Apex events are open to the public, but you have to pay a very, very hefty fee just to get into those events. Okay. They don't really sell tickets to those. Okay. It's one of these very kind of private, intimate events. And I've been to the Apex. The live Apex experience is phenomenal. It's great. The UFC staffers are awesome. You guys know who you all are. I don't need to mention any names on here, but you guys know who you all are that make those events run smoothly. Okay. I can't say the same for the TV product, to be honest with you. The TV product to me feels like any other UFC event, and the TV product is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but to say that it's the same as an arena, I don't know, man. I don't agree. And as someone who's been to several arena based shows, I can tell you there's a huge difference. And speaking of arena based shows, and I'm sorry about that just a minute ago, if you guys heard that, that's my bad. Speaking of arena based shows, the UFC remains in Las Vegas, T-Mobile Arena for UFC 313 this Saturday night, and it's headlined by a huge light heavyweight title fight. Alex Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev, huge fight in the light heavyweight division, 205 pounds. There, Pereira defending his title once again. Ankalaev on an 11 fight unbeaten streak. Huge fight. This is a fight that's needed to happen for a while. Ankalaev is solid. He's good everywhere the fight goes. But I think he'll need to want to take this to the ground. I think Pereira is a devastating striker. I think people have kind of discounted how good Pereira is. Finally, I think the Khalil Roundtree fight proved a lot of people wrong that he can overcome adversity because he was losing that fight at one point. And Ankalaev has a lot to prove too. He was given a UFC light heavyweight title shot a couple of years ago. It didn't go that well. That went to a draw also. And it was not a good performance. He has since looked great in his last few fights. He deserves this opportunity, but I think Pereira is just a stud, man. I think if Pereira keeps this thing standing, I think Ankalaev is going to have problems, and I think if Pereira clips him, he's going to get knocked out. So my early pick is I think Pereira gets this fight done, and I think he does so in the third round. I think he clips Ankalaev mid to late third round. I think he knocks him out, and I think he defends his title again, and I think it's going to be a long road back for Ankalaev to get a title shot once more at 205 pounds as Pereira continues to roll over to that division with ease and flying colors. So good for him on that front. But I love Pereira in this spot. And then in the co-main event, just because of the short notice element, I really do like Justin Gaethje to beat Rafael Fiziev. Again, a good fight, a rematch from a couple years ago. But again, Justin Gaethje, he's at a full camp. Vazeev hasn't. I think Gaethje knows what he's fighting for. He wants a shot at Makhachev at some point, I'm sure. That's what he said in several interviews. And then, of course, Vazeev has rode the wave. He's on a nice win streak. He's beat some solid contenders. I think Gaethje overall, though, is the better fighter. I like him by decision in this fight. It's a 3-round fight as opposed to a 5-round fight. So just something to bear in mind as well. And before we get off of UFC 313 to move on into college basketball, just wanted to give you a capsule as to what to expect on this card. So it's UFC 313 this Saturday, the third pay-per-view of the year, first event at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas for the UFC in 2025. It is a 6:30 Eastern prelim start, 12-fight card in total. The prelims are on ESPN News and ESPN2, or excuse me, ESPN News and ESPN following the Duke UNC game. So if you want the full preliminary card, you might need to go to ESPN News to get it because I'm sure UNC and Duke will run over. So we've got Pereira versus Ankalaev in the main event. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. This next fight has a big asterisk next to it. Let me just make sure there hasn't been any breaking news about this since we started recording, because there's been rumblings across social media that this fight could potentially get canceled. That I'm about to reference. Let me just make sure, so I can just say tentatively what's going on. Okay. Yeah, right now it seems like a rumor. So the rumor is that Jalen Turner is allegedly out of his fight with Ignacio Bahamondes, and potentially stepping in for him is Tom Nolan, but nothing has been definitively confirmed. So tentatively right now, it's Turner versus Bahamondes, third fight in the main card, but that could change. So just something to bear in mind. There's a little asterisk. Amanda Lemos versus Lucindo, King Green versus Mauricio Rufy, and a couple other fights in the card too that should be pretty good, including the rebooked Curtis Blades fight, which was supposed to be on UFC Seattle, but they moved it off that card to this one. So stay tuned. UFC 313 live on pay-per-view. You don't want to miss it. Main event per Ankalaev UFC light heavyweight title. You know the drill. Should be a good card. And again, it's the UFC's pre-March Madness pay-per-view, so it's always a big one, and I think this one is no exception. All right, everyone, let's move on now to Big Ten men's basketball. So we have a lot going on here. So we've got a wild Big Ten regular season title race going on into the final week of the regular season. In the mix, though, Michigan State, Michigan, those are the two to focus on. And let me just give you all the scenarios. So let me just make sure. It's been a fun year, and we're getting down to the final stretch. Scenario. Let me just make sure. All right, here we go. All right. This is according to SB Nation's Mason Brew. And this is how it looks. So here we go. So there's several scenarios going on. This is as of Tuesday. Not really many of them have took effect yet, at least not yet. So number one, Michigan State. Okay, so number one, Michigan wins at Maryland and loses at Michigan State. That's number one. And the other one is if Michigan State loses at Iowa and Michigan. So, self-explanatory as he writes, if Michigan wins out and Michigan State drops its final two, which includes a loss to Michigan, Michigan wins the Big Ten. Okay. That is scenario number one. Scenario number two is a little bit interesting. So, there's a lot here. So, Michigan wins versus Maryland. Michigan State wins. Well, Michigan wins versus Maryland and Michigan State at Breslin. Then Michigan State wins at Iowa and loses to Michigan. Purdue loses to either or both Rutgers and Illinois. Illinois plays Purdue this Friday night, and UCLA wins out. They're on the verge of doing so. They just beat Northwestern in a wild ending last night in Evanston, so they're on the verge of doing that as well. So If Michigan, if Michigan and Michigan State share the Big Ten title after Michigan wins its final 2 games, the Wolverines will claim the #1 seed if UCLA wins out and Purdue drops one of its final 2. This is because Michigan State's loss to UCLA would even out Michigan's loss to Purdue, but Michigan played Purdue twice and beat the Boilermakers a second time. So Michigan State is 1-1 against these two teams, while Michigan is 2-1, giving the Wolverines a better winning percentage. You got all that? All right. Keep moving on. Scenario number 2, still for the #1 seed. Okay. So Michigan beats either Maryland or Michigan State. As long as Michigan gets to 15 Big Ten wins, no program can catch up. Makes a lot of sense given Michigan's current record at the moment. #2 seed, Michigan wins against Maryland and at Michigan State. Michigan State wins at Iowa and loses to Michigan. UCLA loses to either or both Northwestern and or USC. They've already beat Northwestern, so the only option there would be a potential USC loss, and Purdue wins out. Wrapped up and above, UCLA must win out for Michigan to have a chance at the top seed. However, if Purdue also wins out, Michigan would fall to the #2 seed. All right, we're going to go through a few more, and then I won't bore you with scenarios anymore as we get into more stuff. All right, this is very important. #2 seed, scenario number 3. Michigan loses to Maryland and Michigan State. Maryland beats Michigan but loses to Northwestern. Still a possibility. It's Maryland's final game of the regular season. Wisconsin wins out. If Michigan loses its final 2 games of the season, things get much more dicey. Luckily, there's a situation where the Wolverines still claim the #2 seed. Wisconsin would have to win out, which is certainly plausible, but the kicker is Maryland would need to lose to Northwestern, which is not out of the question considering how well Northwestern has been playing lately. All right, I'm not going to go through all of these anymore. Just wanted to get that out of the way in regards to the Big Ten title race, which is kind of what we already discussed still. But though, going back to this, that's part of the biggest headline is who's going to win the Big Ten. So it'll be between Michigan and Michigan State, I would say. Then just a few Big Ten surprise teams that I've liked in the last few weeks. Wisconsin's got to be one of them for sure. Illinois, which we'll talk about in a second, they're definitely a surprise team after losing 4 in a row. They've won 2. Ohio State has played decently well in the last 2 weeks, and UCLA has found ways to win too. There's a lot of good teams in this league. And going into this resurgence, again, Illinois lost 2 in a row, have found a way to win its last 2, doing so on the road, though, this past Sunday against Michigan by 20. That's now 9 wins in a row for Illinois, head-to-head against the Wolverines, and I think I'm going to say the 5th at Chrysler Center. Dating back however long, so it's a solid. It's a solid time to be Illinois. They finally figured things out. They've had some lineup changes, played really well down the stretch. They've got one more game to go against Purdue, who they've historically struggled with. Very, very exciting stuff. And then, of course, you have the Big Ten tournament. So, getting into that, very excited to announce that I will be there in person in Indianapolis 1 week from Thursday, covering the final 4 days of the Big Ten tournament. I won't be there on day 1, just too many days. I've done day 1 before. There's not a whole lot to it, and I don't think I need to be there for the first day, but I will be there for the remaining 4 days, starting on Thursday, which is more than likely when Illinois will play #7 seed as of right now. They'll probably keep it that way. But yeah, I will be there live, doing my thing coverage-wise. So stay tuned for stories to come. It should be a whole lot of fun there. Very much looking forward to it. It's now my second appearance as media. I did the 2023 one when Purdue beat Penn State in the championship, hoping for more parity this time at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Should be a blast. Last time I was in that building was March of 2021 when Illinois beat Ohio State to win the Big Ten championship. So I'm very, very much looking forward to this. So excited. Can't even begin to express how grateful I am that I get to do these. I'm a very, very lucky individual. I realize that, but it just goes to show you that no matter what industry you work in, with hard work and with dedication and with putting in the time and knowing the craft and knowing what your audience wants, good things can happen to you. That is exactly what is happening to me. And I'm very, very much grateful to myself and what I've been able to put in make this possible. So I'm very, very excited to get to Indy, cover another tournament, and maybe, just maybe, my alma mater will be there at the end on Sunday afternoon. So remains to be seen. A lot of exciting stuff as the Big Ten tournament and as March Madness draws ever so closer to fruition. All right, a bit of a sad note now. We're going to get into the Kansas situation. So obviously, this past weekend, Kansas lost to Texas Tech. Unfortunately, though, this caused Kansas into a bit of a panic. Very, very disturbing stuff. We're going to get into it right now. So I want to read to you just kind of what happened because I'm trying to encapsulate this as best I can. Um, Again, very, very disappointing. Um, Zeke Mayo was the player that was being very, very racially targeted towards um, the Kansas Jayhawk faithful after they lost to Texas Tech this past weekend. So let's get into it here. This is according to Kansas Jayhawks on Sports Illustrated. Um, he regrets a statement that he made. He regrets the statement he put out about Mayo's situations. That's what he said. He goes, um, I shouldn't have done it because all I did was bring more attention to what was said. I feel like there's been some unfair personal attacks and criticisms, but not by people that matter. A lot of that comes from people who are not KU fans, they're gambling and lost a bet or whatever. But so much of young people's identities, what people are saying on social about them on social media. I want to get that point out that these kids care and that they're trying. Just as heads up, um, his player did not have a particularly good game, and to put it into so many words, he um he wrote a very long post about how he was feeling, and he included screenshots of private DMs that were racially profiled and very, very disturbing regarding self-harm and stuff like that because of his performance. And overall, just a very sad situation. Just overall, a sad, disappointing situation all around. Not good for any party involved at all. Um, I mean, I'm not even. I have no affiliation with Kansas whatsoever. I don't really follow this team, but to see something like this occur is really, really disappointing. Um, obviously, obviously, Kansas is, they're not having their greatest season, of course. Um, and it's not good. Hang on, let me just make sure I guess. Yeah. Um, and of course, Kansas lost last night to Houston. Very disappointing. So they're kind of now in a position to where they're not the same Kansas team they once were, and it's very disappointing for them. So overall, the Zeke Mayo thing, disappointing. Hopefully he can learn from it. Hopefully he can bounce back. Again, shouldn't be being treated that way by people, as Coach Self said, don't matter. So, yep, there's that. And then briefly, the NFL Combine, a decent combine, a lot of interesting takeaways. Was Will Howard's performance not as good as people said? That remains to be seen. I think Pat Bryant did well with his drills. He did really well. I think the Shedeur Sanders thing is interesting. We'll get more into that in the coming days on Bando's Blitz and Zain Zinger Part 2, most likely. And I personally think that Cam Ward will be the number one quarterback picked in the draft. I think he's the best quarterback in the class. I think he did great things for Miami. I think Miami was on the verge of being a playoff team. He should have brought them there. He didn't. But I think he did enough to where I think he has the intangibles everywhere to be a quarterback that the NFL thinks he will be. So I'm excited to see what he'll be able to do. Overall, though, a decent combine, some interesting stuff occurred, but I think the biggest takeaway for me is that Cam Ward, in my opinion, is going to be the top quarterback picked in this year's NFL draft coming up next month. No errors this week, which is very good, which means we're going to hop out of here in just a minute. So thank you again for tuning in. This has been Bando's Breakdowns episode 39. Very, very much appreciated for all that you guys do to keep me going and to keep this show going. The support has been nothing short of awesome. I get DMs from you guys all the time. I respond to all of them. Thank you so much for what you guys do to support me. It really means the absolute world. And I couldn't do it without you guys. But with that being said, though, that's going to do it for another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. Again, just a quick reminder, be sure to listen to Bando's Breakdowns wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it, though. Another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. Thanks again for tuning in. Again, very, very much appreciate all of you. I hope you have a good rest of your week. I hope you enjoy all of the remaining college basketball as we get into the final week of the regular season, all the happenings, UFC 313, and so much more. Until then, I will talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.